which Jordan Peterson, dressed here as the Joker, is asked the question, your sense of loneliness, this kind of loneliness pandemic that everyone's been talking about. So don't listen to this psychobabble nonsense. This guy is too smart for his own good to be able to give you some pragmatic advice on the topic of loneliness by spewing psychobabble and nonsense about hormonal change and societal change. Or I pick apart Dr. Jordan Peterson's ridiculous, nonsensical answer that is absolutely harmful to any man or woman that's actually watching this video. Response basically puts women in a box. You gotta watch out for this kind of, like I said, psychobabble that a lot of therapists and psychologists use to give you advice, and it absolutely has no relevance to your personal life. I think Jordan Peterson knows his head from his ass to be having this kind of discussion here. This is absolute nonsense. This is terrible, terrible advice. And that loneliness is not a negative emotion. Loneliness is the lack of meaningful relationships in your life. And meaningful relationships are one of the biggest factors to happiness. So I would suggest to you to invest in meaningful relationships. Women are not more susceptible to loneliness because of hormonal change. To be happy. You don't have to wait for any kind of hormonal change. You don't have to wait for any kind of societal change. You can choose to be happy right this very nanosecond. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Good Problems Podcast. I am your host, David Nima. I am the author of the book, Good Problems to Have, lawyer by trade, and your happiness coach. In today's video, we are going to pick apart Jordan Peterson's response to the question of whether or not women are more susceptible to loneliness than men. This is from a segment on Real Time with Bill Maher, in which Jordan Peterson, dressed here as the Joker, is asked the question of whether or not women are more susceptible to loneliness than men. Now, Jordan Peterson, as you might know, is a psychologist from Canada who's gained notoriety through social media. He's got a big YouTube channel, and he's also authored a couple of different books. And his response really pissed me off. His response, in my opinion, is so toxic. His response basically puts women in a box whereby they're more susceptible to, I guess, being unhappy. And he ties the reasons for it to hormonal change and societal change. Okay, so essentially what he does is he takes all the control out of the hands of women. He tries to take the control away from you for your personal happiness by spewing psychobabble and nonsense about hormonal change and societal change that has led to more unhappiness in women. What he calls negative emotion, which is the lack of happiness because of your hormonal changes. And this is primarily for women. He argues that at puberty, you guys go through more hormonal changes that make you more susceptible to unhappiness, which is absolutely BS ridiculous, okay? Then he argues that because of societal trends, mostly, women having more equality and more independence in the workplace, women are now less happy than they were maybe 500 years ago, okay? And that's a complete nonsense here, and another kind of angle through which he analyzes this question that takes the control out of your hands and takes your happiness out of your hands. So we're going to debunk his response, and I'm going to give you in this video the true sources of happiness and things that produce unhappiness, or what he calls it a negative emotion, but there's no such thing as negative emotion. You're either happy or you're unhappy. You're either happy or you're stressed. Okay, so what you want to do, as I discuss in the book, happiness is a practice. It's not a destination. You're not going to just arrive to a happy place and be there forever. You got to continue to practice happiness. And the way you practice happiness is by practicing the things that you know are going to make you happy and keeping the things that you think will make you unhappy or give you stress out of your life. And that's exactly what we're going to discuss in this video after I pick apart Dr. Jordan Peterson's ridiculous, nonsensical answer that is absolutely harmful to any man or woman that's actually watching this video. So let's go through it, and then we're going to talk about it some more.
For Jordan, are men more susceptible to loneliness than women?
No. Well, we know this. So At puberty, women become more sensitive to negative emotion than men, and then that's permanent, on average, through the entire life course. And it looks like it's associated with hormonal changes. And so cross-culturally, women experience higher levels of depression and anxiety and shame and guilt, all the negative emotions.
So basically, what he's arguing here is that he's talking about this term called negative emotion, which I think is another buzzword that really has no meaning. You're either happy or you're unhappy. That's all the way you want to look at it. You're either feeling happy or you're not feeling happy. So you're probably feeling some kind of stress or negative emotion, I guess. You want to call it fear, anxiety, depression. But it's really just about whether or not it's the absence of happiness that he's talking about here. And, he is, like he says right now, he's tying it to puberty and hormonal changes, making women more susceptible to these negative emotions, which is, again, completely bogus. One of the reasons that maybe women might be going through depression is that because they get judged more throughout society. They get judged for their actions, and they have much more kind of toxic influences in their lives that's leading to less happiness in their lives. So the fact that women are reporting higher degrees of depression or any other kind of negative emotion is absolutely meaningless to you personally, right? You got to look to see what are the things in your life that is leading to a lack of happiness, right? And you want to look at this in terms of happiness or the absence of happiness. The word negative emotion really has no meaning. And again, everybody goes through hormonal changes. Those hormonal changes are tremendously different person to person, including between genders. So don't listen to the psychobabble nonsense. This guy is too smart for his own good to be able to give you some pragmatic advice on the topic of loneliness and having meaningful relationships to offset loneliness. So let's listen to a little bit more.
And so loneliness is a pain-related emotion, and women are more susceptible to that.
What do you know?
Okay, so that's just absolutely ridiculous, right? Loneliness is a pain-related emotion, and women are more susceptible to. That is, just, again, it's just like so much psychobabble. I'm an attorney, and I'm having difficulty understanding what Jordan's trying to say, okay? What you want to talk about is, again, loneliness does lead to unhappiness. Meaningful relationships is the antidote to loneliness. Okay, if you want to offset your loneliness, you need to have more meaningful relationships in your life. And as I've discussed in the book, and has been confirmed by other studies and TED Talks that I've posted before, meaningful relationships do not have to come from your spouse or your children or your parents. They can come from your siblings. They can come from, your neighbors, your coworkers, your pets even can be a source of meaningful relationships. In fact, some of the strongest kind of indicators of happiness and longevity is your relationship with your local barista, with strangers that you see walking down the street, okay, and having rich social interactions with them.
Those people, that little clutch of people, are a strong predictor, if you have them, of how long you'll live. And then something that surprised me, something that's called social integration. This means how much you interact with people as you move through your day. How many people do you talk to? And these mean both your weak and your strong bonds. So not just the people you're really close to who mean a lot to you, but like, do you talk to the guy who every day makes you your coffee? Do you talk to the postman? Do you talk to the woman who walks by your house every day with her dog? Do you play bridge or poker or have a book club? Those interactions are one of the strongest predictors of how long you live.
So you do not need to have meaningful relationships just with your nuclear family, but meaningful relationships are absolutely a key factor in happiness, and obviously they offset loneliness. So I would suggest to you to invest in meaningful relationships. Women are not more susceptible to loneliness because of hormonal change. Everybody can become more susceptible to loneliness if they're not investing in meaningful relationships. Everybody can, whether you're a man or a woman, no matter what your age is. Okay, so my suggestion to you to offset loneliness is to invest in meaningful relationships. And again, as I discussed in chapter 2 of the book, does not have to be your nuclear family. This can definitely be your neighbors, your coworkers, your community. And again, just smiling at your local barista will go a long way to kind of kick off the endorphins in your brain, get you that kind of social gratification that human beings are so hungry for. We're such social beings and we love social interaction. And that, in effect, leads to a lesser feeling of loneliness. Okay? But Jordan Peterson doesn't describe it this way. He just resorts to, like I said, like he's studied this too much, I think, and he's too deep into the theories of psychology rather than being able to give you pragmatic advice. Like right now, here's your advice. Go to Starbucks, go to your local coffee shop, order a cup of coffee, and give the barista a genuine smile and a look in the eyes. Okay? And watch that barista smile back at you. Okay? And report to me and tell me in the comments whether or not you felt more happy by doing that.
Yeah. I would say a different view of women from Jordan.
What do you mean different?
Well, I mean, the depression, anxiety, what else do we have that's loneliness, everything negative.
No, not everything negative. Just
Okay.
because men are much more likely to be aggressive and end up in prison and to be alcoholic, and they're overrepresented in learning disabilities. Like there are sex differences in psychopathology, and they're not all tilted negatively towards women. Definitely not. So, but negative emotion, it's absolutely clear that that's the case, and it's the biggest differences are in the countries that have the most gender equal economies and socioeconomic structures.
See, he's right now claiming that if you live in a more progressive society that has more gender equality, you as a woman are more susceptible to negative emotion. And that is absolutely absurd. Again, he's taking the control out of your hands and blaming or kind of appointing the reason to being societal trends. That's not true. The way you offset negative emotion or the way that you increase happiness and reduce sources of unhappiness is by removing toxic activities from your life. Things like gossip, judgment, negative self-talk, lack of gratitude, anger, a lack of meaningful relationships. These things are the things that are going to lead to unhappiness. And you have control over those things. You have the control not to judge others. You have the control not to gossip. You have the control to only engage in positive self-talk and stop doing any kind of negative self-talk. And you have control over the relationships in your life. And those are the biggest factors by far to happiness than this kind of societal trend that Jordan's talking about. Now remember, earlier in the video, he talked about hormonal changes within the body that leads to higher negative emotion experienced by women, which is absolutely just wrong on so many levels. And now he's talking about societal trends. I'm here to tell you, whether you're a man or a woman, by practicing more gratitude, keeping negative self-talk out of your life, don't gossip, don't judge, and increasing your meaningful relationships around you, you will be more happy. And these are completely in your control. So you got to watch out for this kind of, and Jordan Peterson is one of the top kind of psychologists, I guess, in the world. And you got to watch out for this kind of psychobabble that has absolutely zero relevance to your life personally right now, sitting here watching this video. What has relevance to you is your meaningful relationships. What has relevance to you is your sense of gratitude for the blessings that you have in your life. And these two things are by far, the top factors that indicate happiness versus, this psychobabble socioeconomic statistics that Jordan's citing here.
So the differences between men and women in terms of sensitivity to negative emotion maximized in Scandinavia. So,
Scandinavians are also much happier than we are, though.
yeah.
There you go.
Well, comparatively, their women are less happy. So,
I mean,
See, that's the kind of nonsense that you really absolutely want to watch out for, right? I mean, this guy's trying to make some kind of argument that, there's the variance between susceptibility to negative emotion in progressive societies like Scandinavia is higher than the variance to susceptibility of negative emotion in more traditional countries, I guess, somewhere where women are not as progressive as they are in Scandinavia. Pamela argues that Scandinavia is one of the happiest countries in the world. And then Jordan says, yeah, but comparatively, the women are less happy. I mean, this is absolutely nonsense. This has no relevance to your own personal life. And who cares about whether comparatively the Scandinavian women are less happy than the Scandinavian men if, as a society, they're happier than, society, men and women in other societies. So, you got to watch out for this kind of, like I said, psychobabble that a lot of therapists and psychologists use to give you advice, and it absolutely has no relevance to your personal life. What has relevance to your personal life is your actions, your relationships, and that is the most important fact. There are happy people in some of the most desolate, poverty-stricken traditional societies in the world, and there are happy people in some of the most affluent and progressive societies in the world. And there are unhappy people in both societies too. So we know that the society that has no bearing on your personal happiness. But what we do know is that your sense of gratitude, your sense of, how much, positive self-talk you engage in, your sense of how many, meaningful relationships you have in your life. Those are the things that impact your personal happiness right now, not societal trends. So there you have it. There you have Jordan Peterson, trying to kind of, give you this narrative here that your sense of loneliness, this kind of loneliness pandemic that everyone's been talking about, is tied to your hormonal changes and the progressive status of the country that you live in, which is absolute nonsense. What is important is that you understand that happiness is a practice. It is not going to last forever. You're going to have ups and downs, but you want to practice to have more ups. You want to practice to have more moments of happiness than unhappiness, knowing that you're never going to reach 100% happiness all the time, right? So happiness is a practice, and the biggest sources of happiness are your sense of gratitude, your sense of self-worth and self-acceptance, how much you judge others, and how much you engage in gossip. So those are the primary factors of happiness. And just be careful for anybody that, there's just so many red flags in this video. They're trying to differentiate between men and women by asking the question that are women more susceptible to loneliness than men? And this is, whenever you hear any kind of question or discussion that separates men and women, you gotta be careful, because these kind of categorization of people are just absolutely meaningless on a micro level, at your own personal level. Who cares if women have more of this hormone than men do? I'm sitting here right now. I could be, above average in terms of one of the hormonal sets and below average on the other one. And nobody, and it's so irrelevant to cite these statistics that, women are more emotional than men. Who cares? This is just complete nonsense. I don't know why a lot of people are spewing this kind of psychobabble, but it has no relevance in your personal life. So anytime you see any kind of question that kind of tries to differentiate between men and women, I think you should have a red flag going up. In addition to that, they don't understand that loneliness is not a negative emotion. Loneliness is the lack of meaningful relationships in your life. And meaningful relationships are one of the biggest factors to happiness. And it doesn't seem like any of them are making that connection. Jordan is just arguing in a vacuum here that, you're more susceptible to negative emotion. Loneliness is a pain emotion. Your hormones are, making you more susceptible to this type of emotion. And so is your society around you because of the changes in gender roles that are happening in more progressive communities. This is absolute nonsense. This is terrible, terrible advice. So again, if you want to increase more happiness in your life, practice gratitude, practice positive self-talk, practice having more meaningful relationships in your life, and stay away from any kind of gender-specific advice and any of this kind of advice that ties the way you feel to your hormonal change or to these kind of societal changes that are happening in your community. It's all within you. Your sense of happiness is within you, and you can choose to be happy right now. Right now, you can choose to be happy. You don't have to wait for anything to be happy. You don't have to wait for any kind of hormonal change. You don't have to wait for any kind of societal change. You can choose to be happy right this very nanosecond. So that's a little bit about Jordan Peterson and psychobabble and gendered kind of advice and analysis when it comes to love, dating, and relationships. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe to the Good Problems Podcast on YouTube and Instagram, and I will see you all in the next video.